After 8 years of miscarriages and silence, my husband threw the adoption papers in the recycling bin and told me his physiotherapist was carrying his child instead. He thought leaving me in a Sudbury snowstorm with nothing but a duffel bag would break me. He had no idea the quiet paramedic next door, the one everyone in the building called the lonely one, was actually heir to one of the largest private hospital networks in Ontario, or that 6 months later I'd be standing beside him holding twins while my ex-husband's law firm collapsed around him. The furnace in our condo had been making that clicking sound for weeks, the one my husband Graham kept saying he'd get looked at, and I remember thinking how stupid it was that I was worried about a furnace while sitting on the bathroom floor with a negative test in my hand. My 8th round of IVF. 8 years of needles, of mood swings that made me cry at dish soap commercials, of Graham sitting across from me at dinner not really looking at me anymore. I was 36. He was 38, a partner at one of the bigger corporate law firms downtown, the kind of man who pressed his shirts himself because he didn't trust the dry cleaner. We'd been married for 9 years. For the first 3, things were good. For the last 6, I'd watched something in him go cold. Slowly, the way a kettle stops being hot but you don't notice until you touch it. I heard the front door before I heard him. He didn't call out "I'm home" the way he used to. He just walked straight to the bathroom door and pushed it open without knocking. "We need to talk," he said. I was still sitting on the tile floor. "Can it wait? No, it can't wait." He had a folder in his hand, the kind with the elastic band around it that he used for client files. He dropped it on the countersides of the sink and it landed with a soft slap. "I talked to a lawyer." Friday, I looked at the folder. Then I looked at him. "What is this?" "Divorce papers." His voice was flat, the same voice he used when he was reading off a grocery list. I had Stephen draft them this week. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it felt like such an absurd thing to say while I was sitting on a bathroom floor holding a pregnancy test. "Graham, we just talked about the adoption agency last month. We were going to call them back about the home study." I'm not doing the home study." He cut me off, and something in his jaw tightened. "Marianne's pregnant." The bathroom went very quiet. I could hear the furnace clicking somewhere down the hall. "Marianne," I repeated. His physiotherapist, the one he'd been seeing twice a week for his bad shoulder since the spring. 12 weeks, he said, like he was reporting a stock price. "It's mine. I had a paternity test done already before you ask." I want to tell you, I screamed, that I threw something, that I had some dignified, cinematic moment of rage. I didn't. I just sat there on the cold tile with the negative test still in my hand, and I asked the only question that made sense to me. 8 years, Graham. 8 years, and you're telling me you can have a baby in 12 weeks with someone else? "It's not about blame," he said, which is the kind of thing people say right before they do something incredibly blameworthy. "I want kids. You know that." I waited as long as I could. He told me I had until Friday to find somewhere else to stay. The condo was in his name. His parents had put the down payment on it as a wedding gift, technically to him, a detail I hadn't thought about in 9 years and that suddenly mattered very much. My name wasn't on the mortgage. It had never occurred to me to ask for that, back when we were 27 and stupid with love. I won't walk you through every hour of that week because most of it was just packing. I had less than I expected after 9 years of marriage. Some clothes, my late mother's jewelry box, a box of photo albums, my laptop. Graham didn't help. He worked from the kitchen table the whole time on calls about some merger, like I was a contractor he was paying to clear out a storage unit. His mother, Patricia, came by on the Thursday. She'd never liked me much. Too practical, she used to say, like that wasn't insult. She stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom and watched me fold sweaters into a suitcase. "You should have just had the surgery years ago instead of all this nonsense with the clinics," she said. "Save everyone the trouble." I didn't answer her. There wasn't a version of that conversation that ended anywhere good. By Friday afternoon, I had a storage unit in Garson booked for the furniture I was allowed to keep, and a duffel bag with 3 days of clothes, because that was all I could carry on the bus. It had started snowing that morning, the wet, heavy kind that Sudbury gets in late November, and it hadn't stopped by the time I left the condo for the last time. Graham didn't drive me anywhere. He didn't offer. I ended up in a basement apartment on the east side that a coworker from the marketing agency had mentioned once, half furnished, smelling like someone else's cooking through the floorboards above. $300 under market because the landlord hadn't fixed the water heater. I had $2,000 in a savings account that was technically mine, and a job that paid enough to survive but not enough to feel like surviving was easy. The first week, I barely left. I'd sit on the second-hand couch with my coat still on because the heat took forever to kick in, and I'd think about the 8 years. About every needle. About the time I drove myself home from the clinic after a failed transfer because Graham had a deposition. I'd been the one apologizing to him all those years for my body not doing what it was supposed to do, and somehow he was the one who got to walk away clean. His parents and a small crowd of friends I used to think were mine sent the same message more or less. Things happen for a reason. He's still a good person, deep down. Don't make this messier than it needs to be. Nobody asked what I needed. Everyone seemed mostly concerned with whether I was going to be difficult about it. The man next door, I noticed him the second week, mostly because the building's mail slots were practically on top of each other and I kept getting his flyers by mistake. Late 40s, quiet, always in scrubs or a faded Laurentian University hoodie. He worked night shifts, I figured out, because his lights would be off by the time I got up and on again around supper time. One of the other tenants, an older woman named Bev, who fed the stray cats behind the building, told me his name was Rosonen and that he kept to himself. Lonely fella, she said, shaking her head like it was a tragedy. Divorced a few years back, keeps that hoodie on no matter the weather. I think his wife took most of the furniture too, by the look of his place. I didn't think much of it beyond a kind of vague kinship, another person whose life had been emptied out by someone who used to claim they loved them. The first real conversation we had was because of a dead car battery. Mine in the building's gravel lot 3 days before Christmas in -22 weather. I was standing there with the hood up, staring uselessly at the engine like staring would fix it when he came out in his scrubs and a parka thrown over top. "You want a boost?" he asked. "Not much else." He had cables in his trunk, the good kind, heavy gauge, and he hooked them up without making a thing of it. "Thank you," I said, my breath fogging between us. "I'm Ophelia, by the way. I just moved into the basement unit." "Ronan," he said. "Heard the walls are thin down there. Sorry in advance if my shift schedule keeps you up." It wasn't romantic, that first conversation. It was just two tired people in a parking lot in the cold. But he checked on my car twice more that week without me asking, leaving a note under my windshield wiper the second time that just said, "Battery's old, might want to swap it before Jan," in handwriting that looked like a doctor's. Over the following months, it became this quiet, ordinary friendship. He'd knock if he saw my light on late and I looked like I hadn't eaten, hand me a container of soup his coworker's wife had overmade, never staying long enough to make it weird. I found out, slowly, piece by piece, that he was a paramedic, that he'd been one for almost 20 years, that his ex-wife had left him for reasons he never went into detail about and I never pushed. He never once asked me about my marriage in a prying way. He just let me talk when I wanted to and didn't fill silence when I didn't. What he didn't tell me, not for months, was his last name. I found out by accident in March when I drove him to the hospital after he threw his back out, lifting a patient and his own car wouldn't start. I was sitting in the family waiting area at Health Sciences North while they got him an x-ray, and a nurse came by with a clipboard, calling for family of Ronan Whitfield Caro. I didn't think anything of it until the nurse, recognizing the second half of the name, got noticeably more formal, more careful. The way people get around money even when they don't know they're doing it. I asked him about it later, half joking, when he was back home with an ice pack and a grimaces. "Whitfield Caro," I said. "As in the hospital wing? The cancer center on Walford?" He looked uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen from him before. "My grandfather started a company that became part of a bigger one. There's money in the family. I don't really touch it." It turned out his family controlled a private healthcare network with facilities across Ontario and into Quebec, clinics, long-term care homes, a piece of 2 hospitals' specialty wings, the kind of holdings that meant his last name alone opened doors most people never see. He'd walked away from all of it in his 20s, became a paramedic instead, because he said he wanted to actually help people with his own hands instead of from a boardroom. His ex-wife, it turned out, had married him knowing exactly who his family was and left once she understood he had no real interest in claiming any of it. He wasn't lonely because nobody wanted him. He was lonely because almost everyone who'd ever gotten close had wanted something else entirely. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't my secret to spend. What grew between us after that wasn't sudden. There was no single dramatic moment. It was Tuesday dinners that became every dinner, It was him teaching me how to check my own oil so I'd stop calling him for it. It was me sitting in the ER waiting room, more than once when his shifts went sideways. It was both of us slowly admitting, without ever quite saying it out loud, that we'd built something neither of us had been looking for. By June, we were together properly. By August, I'd moved my things up from the basement into his unit, the one with actual furniture this time. And in October, almost a year to the day after Graham threw that folder on the bathroom counter, I found out I was pregnant, naturally. No clinic, no needles, no calendar of appointments. I sat in my bathroom, Ronan's bathroom, hours nows, and stared at 2 lines for a long time before I trusted them enough to take a second test. At the 12-week ultrasound, the technician went quiet in that particular way that makes your stomach drop, and then turned the screen toward us and said, "There's 2 heartbeats. Twins." After 8 years of being told, gently and not so gently, that maybe my body simply wasn't built for this, I was carrying twins with a man I'd known for less than a year. Graham found out the way most of Sudbury eventually found out things, through his mother, who heard it from someone at her bridge club whose daughter worked admin at the hospital where I had my prenatal care. Patricia called me directly, which she'd never done in 9 years of marriage to her son. "Is it true?" she asked. "No hello? That you're pregnant with the Whitfield Caro boy?" I confirmed it, mostly out of spite, I'll admit. The silence on the other end of the line was its own kind of confession. She understood immediately what that name meant in this city. Graham called 2 days later. I almost didn't pick up. "I heard. No congratulations, obviously." "Twins. I didn't think you could, neither did I said. "Funny how that works." There was a long pause. "Marianne lost the baby in March," he said finally. Quiet now, none of the flatness from that bathroom conversation a year earlier. "We tried again, nothing's worked since." I felt something in that moment, but it wasn't satisfaction the way I'd imagined it might be. All those nights in the basement apartment. It was just tired. "I'm sorry to hear that, Graham, I genuinely am. But I don't think you called to tell me that. I made a mistake," he said. "A big one. I know that now. I didn't owe him a single word after that, and I didn't give him many." "I hope things work out for you," I told him, and meant it in the distant way you mean things for someone you used to love and no longer do. "Please don't call this number again." The twins came in May, 2 days apart from due date, a boy and a girl. Ronan was in the delivery room holding my hand so tight I had to tell him to ease up, and when they put our daughter on my chest first, he made a sound I'd never heard a grown man make before, something caught between a laugh and something else entirely. His family showed up at the hospital in numbers I hadn't expected. His mother, his 2 sisters, an aunt who brought enough flowers to fill the whole room. They didn't treat me like an outsider or like an opportunity. His mother held my hand at one point and said, "He told us about you a long time before he told you about us. We've been waiting to meet you properly." I think about that bathroom floor sometimes, the cold tile, the negative test, Graham's flat voice telling me Marianne was 12 weeks along. I think about how certain he seemed that he was the one walking towards something better, and I was the one being left behind with nothing. He wasn't wrong that my life changed completely after that day. He just had no idea it would change into this. A man who checked my car battery before he ever asked my last name, 2 heartbeats on a screen I'd stopped believing I'd ever see. A family that showed up for me before I even understood what showing up was supposed to look like. I sat by the hospital window that first night with my daughter asleep against my chest and my son in Ronan's arms across the room, watching the late spring snow flurries drift past the glass, and for the first time in almost a decade I didn't feel like I was waiting for my life to start. I felt like I was finally living in it.